Hello, hello. How is everyone today? After a month of rain, it is sunny here in Taipei. I already have 3 downvotes? What the fuck? What did I do? What did I do, guys? 3 downvotes already. Um, yeah, so before we get to anything, I guess in the chat before we started, we were talking about Robb. And someone mentioned the Robb zombie theory, which um, I think is a bit much, though I think there's a lot of interesting things to talk about when it comes to the fate of Robb. So when Robb died at the Red Wedding, um, we know that his head was cut off and a wolf's head was put on his body. And the weird thing about that is that a direwolf head is far too big for a human body. And so people wonder if Grey Wind's head was actually put on Robb's body or not. The last time we see Grey Wind, he is freed by Reynold Westerling, the Knight of Seashells, and supposedly, I guess you hear that the wolf is killed, and Reynold Westerling is shot and falls into the river. But we don't really have any idea where Grey Wind or the Knight of Seashells is. So, which kind of plays into like the prologue and things like that. Like we have another missing knight who may or may not be dead. Grey Wind, the only real proof that Grey Wind died because he was giving people trouble was the fact that the wolf's head would be on Robb's body, but it doesn't really make sense for a direwolf head to be on the body anyway. And so after this parading of a wolf's head on Robb's body, we don't know where the body went. I mean, maybe a shallow grave, maybe into the river. Probably, most of the bodies seem to be dumped in the river, but we have no idea. Then there's the question of like Robb's head, which is a whole different issue. So, meanwhile, in King's Landing, Joffrey thinks it's really going to be really, really funny if he serves Robb's head to Sansa and forces her to kiss it. But so he directly orders Pycelle, like to his face. He says, "This is a king's command. Like, go get Walder Frey to send me Robb's head." Now, immediately after, like everybody's like, "Dude, that's a horrible idea. What are you doing?" Like, Cersei is like, he's totally joking. Tywin sends Joffrey to bed. It's very embarrassing. Like, however, there is this question. Like, he still did give a king's command to Pycelle, and granted, Pycelle is a smart dude. He knows that this would be a bad move, but at the same time, he was given a king's command. So the question is like, would Pycelle actually follow up and ask Walder Frey for Robb's head? You don't know. And then there's the question. Then people kind of say, okay, well, say Robb's head was sent to King's Landing, could somehow Qyburn have gotten a hold of it and put it in on top of Sir Robert Strong? And I'm like, that's probably a bit much. I mean, if Robert Strong is Gregor, the idea is that the skull that got sent to Dorne is not Gregor's. And the big, and even though everybody in Dorne is like, this is the biggest skull I've ever seen, I think the joke is that dwarf skulls are actually larger than regular people's skulls. And so that there's an irony to the fact that they received a dwarf skull and think it's a giant skull. And I think this is like the joke of the whole thing. So I think that one of the dwarfs that Cersei had killed, they had a bunch of heads lying around. And so Qyburn took a dwarf skull and sent a dwarf skull to Dorne. And that's like the whole joke, that they thought they got a giant skull, but they got a dwarf skull. And because in reality, dwarf heads are actually slightly bigger than human heads. So for that reason, I don't see Robb's head being on top of Sir Robert Strong's body. Just there's just a lot of like, there's a lot of steps to get to that point. You have to, one, accept that like Pycelle would be a dumbass and actually request the head, and two, like that Walder Frey would actually have the head and that they'd send it, and that's three, like out of Pycelle's possession, it would end up in Qyburn's possession, which is a big jump. And then on top of that, like he would use that skull to send to Dorne he would send Gregor's real skull to send to Dorne rather than just a dwarf skull. And why would Qyburn even put the head on top of like Gregor's body when he has all these other skulls around? It's so there's a lot to that. Now, meanwhile, back with Grey Wind, because there's still more to Robb's fate that I think is very, very interesting. So fans kind of accept that, like, okay, it sounds like Jon's soul is going to go into Grey Wind at least temporarily. We have this whole setup with the prologue about second lives, and Jon says ghost right before he dies, and Melisandre sees a vision of a man becoming a wolf, becoming a man again. Okay, so we kind of accept that that's something that can happen. Except that, like, right before Robb dies, he does the same thing. He says Grey Wind, like in the same way that Robb says that Jon says ghost. He says Grey Wind. So for the exact same reason, I mean, you could have Robb warging Grey Wind before Grey Wind dies, and everybody's like, okay, well, who cares? Maybe Robb did have a second life in Grey Wind very briefly and then get killed, but we don't really have any evidence that the wolf died, because because we have this head that's way too small, this wolf head that's way too small for Robb's body. So we have no proof that Grey Wind is dead and that Robb is not living a second life inside Grey Wind. Now, and then there's this incredibly ambiguous line from Jon 1, which, oh my gosh, fans have debated this line so much. But he says, Ghost says in his head, once there had been 6, 5 whimpering blind in the snow beside their dead mother, sucking cool milk from her hard nipples, whilst he crawled off alone. Okay, so you've got 5 and 1. So we've got 6 wolves, right? Just like the Starks, 5 trueborn, and then 1 bastard one, right? 4 remained. And 1 the White Wolf could no longer sense. So 4 remained. Clearly Lady is dead. Okay. 4 remained. And 1 the White Wolf could no longer sense. So what does that mean? Does the one that the White Wolf can no longer sense, is that supposed to be Grey Wind because he's dead? Or is 4 still remaining, and for some reason he can't contact one of them for whatever reason? I mean, maybe it's because Summer is beyond the wall, and at this point, and when people are beyond the wall, they can't detect them. Like Jon couldn't detect Ghost when he was beyond the wall. So actually, at this point, Ghost is beyond the wall, so it'd be the other way. He shouldn't actually be able to contact anyone except Summer. but there could be a number of reasons why, like, he could not detect one, So some people look at that and go, okay, well, the one that he can no longer sense must be Grey Wind, but maybe there's another reason why he can't sense Grey Wind anymore. Maybe because, he's living a second life with Robb or whatever. There's a million explanations. It's all kind of weird and shady. And clearly George R. R. Martin was writing these things ambiguously, leaving it open. I'm not saying that Grey Wind is alive. And I'm not saying that Robb has warged Grey Wind, okay? I'm saying that George R. R. Martin doesn't know the answer, and he just left that open in case he wanted to do that. Like, This is how I really feel about like Quentin. Like he left all of these doors open. You know, like Quentin might be dead, he may be alive. George doesn't fucking know. Okay, he hasn't planned out the whole story as much as like he claims he has. He hasn't, you know. Let's see. What's the most geographically far-flung marriage pairing that you could see happening in the Winds of Winter? Hmm. Um. Let's see here. See, now that everything's happening in battle and stuff like that, there's not much need for far-flung um, marriages anymore. You know, like um, the the North is kind of isolated and they're going through their battle, and that's just going to be done. Um, and there's not many many advantages to that sort of to those sorts of marriages. I mean, Asha could conceivably marry somebody in the North, but then she's there. So it's like, are these marriages and things happening by letter? Um, uh, but so yeah, I'm not sure anything's too far flung. I mean, I see some things, something happening with the Vale and the Riverlands with the Freys, or the Westerlands and the Freys. But for some sort of like far away kind of marriage, like someone in Dorne and someone in the North, I don't necessarily see that happening or making a difference. The I think as the story goes forward, you're dealing with like real battles on the ground and things that are kind of localized. And if there is like two houses that are far apart, like the people might be in the same location. I mean, I definitely think there's going to be a lot of weird like Reach, Riverlands, Westerlands, Vale kind of marriages going on, but I'm not sure if anything too far flung, like where a raven decides it, and you have two forces on other sides of the world that are aligned happening. So I'm not sure if I see anything like that happening. Um, it's kind of funny. Grey Wind is Stoneheart's champion against Jaime. Yeah, like Robb is actually Grey Wind's inside Robb's head the entire time. This is another interesting thing about obviously going downriver to the Quiet Isle, is that shouldn't the Knight of Seashells be at the Quiet Isle um, uh, when Brienne's there? And so one could make the argument, for example, that the Gravedigger is actually the Knight of Seashells, and it's not the Hound. I'm not sure if we know like the size of Reynold Westerling. Obviously, it'd be one of those like what the fuck like twists where people are like, wait, why did that happen? And you're like, well, it's just Reynold Westerling, the Knight of Seashells, like floated down. Oh, he's young and lean, actually. So it's probably body type wise, the Knight of Seashells is probably not the Gravedigger, but the Knight of Seashells could be on the Quiet Isle. We just never hear about it, but he could be there. But or if they find Robb's body, Robb's head. Da, 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 da. I don't know if we're ready to talk about spicy politics yet, but has there been a real effort from the Democrats to ban guns in the U.S. in the last few decades? Not from the states, so this is a legitimate question. Don't get angry, Preston. No one in America, no politician ever talks about banning guns. What they talk about are really, really, really small measures, like banning assault weapons or banning high capacity magazines. Or specific assault rifles like AR-15s. No one talks about banning guns in general. Politically speaking, everyone thinks that's a kind of death sentence. For I'm just gonna put some photos up here. There we go. We'll just put her. I'm just gonna put her right here. but no one in the States talks about this sort of thing at all. So like the issue right now that Americans talk about is like, oh, can we maybe get high capacity magazines or, assault weapons perhaps like banned, or have a longer, more rigorous background check, things like that. And still like, they're like, no, like all Republicans are like, no, that means you're trying to take away our guns. Like, it's really quite like pathetic in this country, in America. I mean, I say this country because I'm American and I'm not in America right now, but yeah, America is pathetic. Like Americans are just pathetic human beings. Like the fact that like we can allow like so many mass shootings of children. And when you say like something completely reasonable, like maybe you don't need like a high capacity magazine that can like, you can just lower that, or like maybe you don't need an AR-15. Like, why are you hunting with this? But so the efforts that have happened in Congress is there is a bill that passed the House that is stalled in the Senate because the Republicans are gonna you need 60 votes in the Senate to pass anything, so they can filibuster. So there's a few of those in there actually right now, but they won't pass because Americans are pathetic human beings. Like, we'll get back to guns later and how fucking stupid they are. It's one of the things like, Carmine and I are talking about different, even left-wing streamers, and like people like Vosh, who's super left-wing, and yet he like collects guns and like shows them off on his stream. And I'm just like, you're just so pathetic. Like so pathetic. Like trying to look manly by having guns. Like it's just so telling. Like it's such compensation. It's just so dumb. But anyway, super chat to Chadwick Summerchild have an evil twin. Have evil twin Chadwoke. We'll see about the future of Chadwick Summerchild. We'll see if he comes back. I mean, House Summerchild is a pretty big family who's existed for many generations. There's probably actually like several hundred Chads out there of different generations and cousins and everything. And so, I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, there's different Chads. I mean, plus there's Uyghur Chad. There's all sorts of like different Chads out there. So, we've gone too long without books, man. Grey Wind and Rosamund. That's right. Grey Wind's head inside warging Robb's skull. It's inside there, and then at the Dornish feast with Rosamund. I don't know, but I guess the idea would be that the skull is somehow on top of Sir Robert Strong. I don't know. Do you wish Carmine looked at you the way he looks at calzones? I guess so. He actually doesn't, because like he complains that there's no good pizza where he lives now, so he doesn't eat as many calzones. Unfortunately, but he like when he lived in Jersey, he was always just eating calzones. On a live stream a while back, you lifted both your arms like you're holding a giant salt shaker and yelled, "Come!" Very fun, excellent, Aereo. Yeah, I think I did do something crazy like that. Everybody's like, Preston, man, you got to watch it. You're just gonna get clipped, and it's like, yeah. I mean, though I think we're in this world where just everybody gets clipped. I mean, there's a Saturday Night Live joke a while back where it's like, I think ellipses, Hitler was good, and it's like clear they ellipsed out like don't think Hitler was good. Or I think I forget if it's Kids in the Hall or a Saturday Night Live skit where guy goes up for his Oscar speech and he's like, I'd really like to thank the other actors, like my producer, my acting coach. Da, da, da. I'd like to thank Hitler. I'd like to thank my mom and dad. And he goes back to his seat, and they're like, "What, dude? Did you thank Hitler?" And he's like, "No, no, wait, what? No, that was an accident. I didn't." Aren't George's fake out deaths getting a little cliche at this point? It's yeah, absolutely. George R. R. Martin has been doing fake out deaths like constantly. And so this is why like one of these things when people are like, "Oh, do you think like how can you do a fake out death with Quentin?" I was like, "Have you read the rest of the story? Like it's so many fake out deaths. It's over the top the number of fake out deaths that are in Ice and Fire. I mean, just in the sense of like just taking like Brienne or Davos, where you literally like are like, oh my gosh, they've died on screen and then they come back. Or the worst I think is Arya. She takes an axe to the back of the head at the end of a chapter. And you're like, well, shouldn't she be dead? And she's back the next chapter because it was the backside of the axe and it had knocked her out. Which by the way would in real life would cause you massive brain damage and stuff, but like because she wakes up much later. It's not like she wakes up like 20 seconds later. She wakes up like hours later, meaning she has like severe brain damage. But, it's a Hollywood thing of getting knocked out for a long time. But yeah, it's constant. It's constant. He does fake out deaths like all the time. And it's just like, even for characters that he has no intention of bringing back. Like, I don't necessarily think he has any intention of bringing back the Knight of Seashells. But why? But then he freaking leaves it open. Like, why? Like, guns aren't the problem. Guns exist around the world and nowhere near as many of instances. There's a difference. So there's a big difference actually. And so there's a lot of factors. Obviously, I think like, crime and income disparity are gonna, and lack of like, mental health aid for people and stuff like this. But when you actually look at countries, like for instance, gun advocates will point to the fact that like, oh, in Switzerland, there's far more guns per capita and far more gun owners than in the United States. The United States actually has a somewhat low percentage of the population that owns guns. They have a huge number of guns because each of our Americans that owns guns is fetish, like disgusting, like jerk off to a wall of fully automatic weapons, kind of like there's so many of those types. But the actual number of people in America, percentage of the population, has been declining. Like for the most part, Americans like are losing interest in their guns on the whole. It's just the individuals that love guns are becoming much more avid. So, but if you actually look at a place like Switzerland, they have intense gun laws. Intense. So you can say like, yeah, it's not the only factor, but clearly if you got rid of guns or you got rid of high capacity magazines, got rid of assault weapons, like that would help. Like guns are clearly the problem. Like, to say that like guns aren't the problem, like of course they're the fucking problem. Like of course they are. Like now, can you say like, oh, there's other things that are the problem? Like, yeah, if you have a drunk, mentally unstable person in a bar, yeah, they're a problem. If you give them a gun, they're more of a problem. If that person is not drunk, it's a little less of a problem, but he's still mentally unstable. Like you can have an issue that has many factors. Like that's the way issues are. Like there are many things that go into it, but clearly it's easy to like, guns are definitely part of the problem. Like it's ridiculous kind of situation. Supposedly 288 school shootings in the USA, and the next highest is 8 in Mexico. Yeah. That's we have a mass shooting every like more than one a week in America. It's I mean there's so many that we start forgetting about them. Yeah, I got another picture here. Let's see. Hey, how's it going? All right, let's put that. This is, uh, um, but yeah, I agree that the culture around guns is the problem, and I would say the laws and things like that. Like, if you really went like buck wild and went to like a Switzerland level of like control over the guns, like they go through massive amounts of like training and regulations and stuff like that. But yeah, I think you're completely right. Um, let's see. Um, just amazed that both sides were sent up about the police reaction. That's because it gets to be it's someone that both sides can blame without blaming. Like one side doesn't want to blame guns, and so they're like, "Oh, it was the cops' fault. It's the cops' fault." Vosh is pro NATO, and that's kind of weird for a leftist. I mean, it depends how you define leftist. Like I'm a liberal. Does that mean I'm a leftist? Like how to the left? I'm on the left wing, right? Like how far do you have to be to be a leftist? Like I'm definitely pro NATO. NATO's fantastic. But it's yeah, I mean it depends if you define leftists as like those tanky types. I don't know, but it's all these definitions. Like what does it mean to be a progressive? What does it mean to be a liberal? Stuff like that. But who knows? Um, which is older, House Goodman or House Summerchild? They both go back to the dawn of days. I mean, the they go both. Uyghur, by the way, before I get on this, it's Uyghur Chad. Jesus. It's Uyghur. um, yeah, they both go back to the dawn of days. House Goodman and House Summerchild. Um, if the Lannisters have special X genes from Rohan Weber, could the Cersei Jaime incest give Myrcella double X genes? Conceivably, I'm trying to think. I think I brought up the Tyrion Chimera theory, which so Tyrion has two different colored eyes, which means that like there's an idea that he could perhaps be a genetic situation called a chimera, where this is where you have kind of conjoined twins or two twins in the womb that merge back together with each other when they're like zygote. And so when they grow forward into a full embryo, they actually have two sets of DNA in their body. So when a chimera, and this is what a calico cat is essentially. It's an individual with like two sets of DNA based on different regions of the body. So like, this part of your body could have a different DNA set than this part of the body, but there was an in utero fuse. And so the idea is that like, well, if one part of Tyrion's body has a certain genetic code that's needed, and one part of his body has a different genetic code that's needed, and things like this. But yeah, if Rohan Weber and all of this, yeah, had special genes, and the Lannisters had special genes or something, and there was some Jaime Cersei incest, yeah. That could definitely be the situation. Plus, like obviously Tywin and Johanna were only cousins, so you're having like, I think you could probably get Johanna to be double X or have an X, and then have Cersei have special genes, or something. You could always put these things in, anybody could. Maybe they all have special genes. Everybody in the fucking world is a dragon rider. Why are people adamant about the Winds of Winter prologue being a caravan when it's been months since Jane Westerling departed Riverrun? Could ravens have been intercepted? I think it was. This was just a situation of groupthink. Like this was a fan groupthink kind of situation where George R. R. Martin had said, "Oh, Jane Westerling's going to be in the prologue," and somebody said, "Oh, wait, where's Jane Westerling last?" And it's like, "Oh, she's on that caravan." And they say, "Well, okay, well then it's going to be part of that caravan." And the fandom started talking about it for a long time. And it was only and you kind of just go to that default position. Like before I'd thought about it, I went to that default position. But actually, I mean, I read somebody else saying like, wait a minute, like we don't get any mention of anything in the epilogue. And I just saw one comment from somebody, and I was like, yeah, that's totally right. Like why would they be in the caravan? Like it doesn't really make sense. Not to mention like an announced plan doesn't happen. Like there's a lot of little things about why it wouldn't work out very well. So like Jamie specifically thinks that the Brotherhood without banners might attack the caravan. So you've got this announced plan issue. Like announced plan rarely happens, but then he doubles the number of guards, and then he quadruples the number of guards like on it. So you've got like 500 people like guarding Jane Westerling, like more people than we've seen the Brotherhood have. Brotherhood being a ragtag group, like not a group that can like suddenly pull out 500 people for an organized assault on professional fighters. Now then people say, okay, well maybe it won't be the Brotherhood without banners. Maybe it'll be Nymeria, Nymeria's wolf pack. And Nymeria's wolf pack, okay, that solves the announced plan thing. It can still be a surprise. You think it might be the Brotherhood without banners, but instead it's got to be Nymeria. That solves all that. The problem is that we know that Nymeria, they say that Nymeria is north of not one of the, it's after one of the rivers goes out a bit, it gets a different name, but they say she's north of River Run. So and to go to the Westerlands, you go south of the river. So somehow Nymeria and a wolf pack would have to cross the river. And then in the Mercy sample chapter, we see her seeing a weirwood. And so, I think that means she's near Raventree, but like, even if she's not, the idea that like going through mountains of the Westerlands, would there really be a weirwood there and that kind of thing? Like, and plus she says specifically in the Ugly Little Girl chapter that in the Blind Girl chapter that it's been snowing in the Riverlands. So we know that she's in the Riverlands. So it can't really be Nymeria either. So it's just, I just think there was a group thing. Like this sort of thing happens. I mean, we all get into these kind of ideas, like everybody starts talking about it, and you kind of go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Will anything come of Tyrion and Sansa's marriage? I think assassination attempts against Tyrion will come of it. Sansa can't be married until her betrothal is annulled or put aside by the High Septon. And so you need to have some sort of attempt on Tyrion's life or something. This is going to be an issue. Now, it also means that like there's no reason to her to stop being Elaine Stone until she can be married, right? Like she can't be betrothed to someone and like get an alliance until she's single. So she kind of has to wait and stay as Elaine Stone. So I think it'd be really fun. I think it's much more fun to think about the future of Elaine Stone, and like, there's kind of a setup in the Elaine sample chapter of how like, she says, "Oh, Sweet Robin, I can't marry you because I'm a bastard." Oh, oops, and Sweet Robin's like, "Well, wait a minute. Like, what if I'm a king? I can legitimize you, and then you're Elaine Baelish, and Elaine Baelish is the heir to Harrenhal, and like all sorts of fun stuff when Maybe the soldier and the hero actually never died. That's pretty funny. The hero is George R. R. Martin's first published piece. And so it's let's see here. Hold on a second. Okay. All right. I get a go down. Is there a realistic scenario where we don't get evil Dany in the end? It said the show oversimplified George to resolve it in 2 episodes. I think that it's definitely realistic to make just Dany complicated and misunderstood, or just to have her own perspective. You know, like they're they you know, she definitely had, you know, she definitely has an argument for what she wants, and we kind of have to, you know, philosophically ask, like, you know, is Dany's way the right way? um I mean, keep in mind that, like, even in the show, even though it wasn't done very well, like, Dany isn't murdered because she killed all of the people in King's Landing. She should have been. It should have been that reason, but that's not the reason she was killed. Like, she was killed because she didn't think that other people should have a choice in ruling, you know, which was every king, right? They don't get to choose, right? So Dany was just being killed for being the same as um, everybody else. It's kind of a weird situation, but I think it's definitely, there's definitely lots of realistic situations where Dany is not evil. I don't, you know, I don't necessarily think that George, like, had really decided. Like, I don't think he has as much as the story planned out as people think, you know? Like, I understand that, like, some people are like, oh, in the last chapter of A Dance with Dragons, it seems like Dany is going to be, you know, getting into her, like, dark Targaryen, like, vengeful side. And George kind of answered at a con, like, yeah, sure, she's going to go into a little bit more of that. And everybody's like, haha, evil Dany confirmed, you know? And you're like, has he really even decided? Like, maybe he's going to go that route, maybe not. But, you know. Um, Um, have you heard of Red Rising series by Pierce Brown? I'll have to look into Red Rising. Has somebody asked me about that before? Red Rising is a dystopian science fiction novel. Several hundred years since mankind has colonized other planets, powerful ruling class of humans has installed a rigid, color-based social hierarchy based where the physical superior gods at the top rule with an iron fist. 16-year-old Darrow is Red, a class worker who toils beneath the surface of Mars, mining helium-3. Uh, so it sounds like a little bit of The Expanse and a little bit of Brave New World at the same time, you know, or something like that. Um, but yeah, I'll have to look into it. But it's all about whether I have time. Let's see here. Da-da-da-da. I've got to do some. Gotta do some. Hold on a second. Okay, I'm way behind on these comments. Guys, comment so fast. Okay. It's like I start commenting on things that happened like 20 minutes ago, and I'm like, ugh. um, last week you mentioned that the title "Storm of Swords" was random. Wanted to say that that it's a Robert Howard reference. I think phrasing Kings of the Night. Maybe. I don't know. If but it might also be that, like, it was, you know, easy enough to come to that two different people could come to the same, like, phrase, Storm of Swords. But let's see if he knew the guy. Um Oh, he did. He did. George R. R. Martin was a fan of Robert Howard, so it's yeah, it's quite possible. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because George R. R. Martin will say like, oh, like he always mentions like other authors that have a huge influence on him, like Tolkien. He says Robert Howard, Jack Vance, Fritz Lieber. What's funny though is that like clearly Tolkien is in there, but like when you read Dune and even Wheel of Time, you're like, oh my god, like how like George took a lot from these too, but he never admits to those ones. Like he never admits that like so much is taken from Dune, even though it's very clear that a lot of is taken from Dune. Or he hardly ever mentions Michael Moorcock, and so much is taken from Michael Moorcock's work too. But he always goes to those kind of same things, like oh, a lot's taken from Jack Vance. It's like, well, it's true, I guess a lot's taken from Jack Vance, but that's I guess more in a thematic sense, like in a dying world kind of essence kind of thing. But I don't know if anything specific. Like when I start thinking about like the complexities of houses and genetic engineering and conspiracies, like that's not Jack Vance, like um let's see here. Oh gosh. I have to bring up some, sometimes I get pulled into little things here. There are more citizens than government agents, and small guns are pretty effective. No, no, they're not. Like, what are we talking about here? Um, Handguns should be more. This is a big. So this is one of the worst right wing arguments like ever. Is that so? There's this right wing argument that like, oh, the United States needs guns because um, in case the government gets tyrannical, like the people can overthrow it, right? Um, and this completely like supposes that like the government is evil and the people are good and democratic, and that's going to be the situation. When just as easily it can be a good democratic government that's overthrown by shitty people to install a dictatorship. In fact, January 6th was exactly that attempt, right? A democratic government that fairly elected somebody and had a bunch of shitty human beings like trying to subvert democracy to install somebody in a dictatorial fashion. Like so this idea that like the people are always going to be right, like in some sort of like violent uprising, is just laughable. It's just laughable because it could go either way. You can have shitty people overthrow a government. You can have shitty people overthrow a good government. Like, so like giving the public the option to overthrow the government like doesn't do anything. Like you're assuming that the public is always going to be like squeaky wonderful, like, and not be a bunch of like just absolute like zealot idiots. Like, come on. I mean, geez, you could even look at like the Iranian Revolution. I'm not saying the Shah is by any means like a good guy, but like those are worse people like overthrowing like a government in order to install like a really shitty government. Like it's really stupid. It's a really really bad argument, and I just want to like put that forward. Now this idea that small now and then the second thing that's really dumb is that handguns should suffice against the government. We literally have a war right now in Ukraine that shows that like small arms are kind of useless, okay? In the grand scheme of things. Wars are won with tanks, okay? You need big artillery and tanks and air force and all sorts of things in order to take over a government. This idea that like a bunch of people with handguns are going to overthrow a tyrannical government, like, what are you talking about? Like, we have like, there's like, you think you could take on a tank? Like, Ukraine was getting slaughtered before like the West started giving them like anti-tank javelin missiles and things like this. Like, this idea that handguns are good enough, like, what planet are you on? Like, this isn't going to happen. This isn't Red Dawn. like this is why I really like want to push like how conservative media and movies are, and how ridiculous, like the ridiculous notions people get in their heads that you're going to have these like freedom fighters, like defending their land against some sort of like threat. No, like that's not how it works. Like war happens with tanks. Like we're not in like this is like this wouldn't even work in like Civil War times. Like even then you had like cannons and stuff like that like were very important on a battlefield, because you can't, because it has to do with advancing forces, and providing cover and things like this. Like if like maybe if you're in like the Revolutionary War or something, but like you're hundreds of years behind in military warfare ideas if you think that like arming the population with small arms is going to make any difference when it comes to like overthrowing a government. It is laughable. It's laughable. It's a really, really, really dumb idea. Like I just can't believe it keeps getting like propagated, because I guess it doesn't matter, because like they just believe whatever, right? Everybody, like all Democrats are pedos, and like studies have shown that like getting rid of guns like doesn't lower crime and doesn't stop mass shootings. Like all these lies that like people just readily accept in the right wing. Oh my gosh. Shaggy equals black fur, green, ghost inverse. Other direwolves, gray and gold eyes like children of the forest. Rickon, winged wolf chained to stone. Skagos, Jojen, screwed up. There's a lot of there is a lot of talk about the fact that Jojen's vision and even doesn't specify what wolf is winged. And in fact, when Jon goes to the weirwood and starts talking to the weirwood and sees the time traveling entity, or whoever the spiritual entity is, maybe it's not time traveling, I don't know. But like when Ghost finds the weirwood and it's got the face, it's the face of his brother. It's not the face of Bran, it's the face of his brother. So it's not that it's not possible that it's Rickon. I think George R. R. Martin left the door open for like the fake out, like it was Rickon the whole time. So it's quite possible, but everything does point to Bran. Bran does time travel in our story and things like this, but he definitely left it ambiguous. Like he would have said like it had the face of Bran, or he would have said like, oh, the winged wolf had this color fur. He probably would have been more specific had he actually wanted it to be like definitively Bran. But he did. It was pretty clear that he left open the idea that it could just all be Rickon, or it's like that. I guess it's not really like the thing from Harry Potter, because I think fans discovered that some other character like fulfilled the prophecy, and then Rowling like put it in. Where do you think George lies on the political spectrum? He's definitely progressive, but I don't think he's a socialist or anything. What do you think? No, I think he's pretty close to communist. Oh, he's totally a socialist. He's way, 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 way left. Way, way, way left. I mean, it's possible that he's softened up in his old age or something, and has become more conservative as he's become like older and becoming more rich. But in those early days, I mean, he was writing stories sympathetic to communists, like during the Cold War, like during Vietnam. Like now his writing also is very pro meritocracy, so I don't necessarily think he's for like I don't know, he's not a Stalinist or anything like that, but like he's definitely very, very liberal. He is openly, but not so far that he's not going to be voting for Democrats. Every Democrat he's voted for, in recent memory. But yeah, all of his work is about helping the poor, how the poor are trapped in a cycle of poverty, and it's very difficult to escape. And he's written stories against a lot of stories about anti-colonialism and anti-war, and he's written things about. I mean, the weirwood net itself is kind of a communist network of trees and things like this. Like that's definitely the metaphor for when the kind of Andals invade, or the First Men invade against these like indigenous people. He's though I'm trying to think. Sand Kings does not portray, but if he is a communist, he doesn't like Chinese or Soviet communism. I think he was, which a lot of those intellectual communists in the 70s did not. They kind of had this idea that no, we've got a third way on communism, and an intellectual communism was kind of the 70s idea, because he's written stories definitely bashing the Soviet Union and China, but he's really far left, like more far left than me, and I'm pretty liberal, like, but yeah. Does raising the minimum wage have a diminishing effect on inflation? Over the past 50 years, it seems the lack of minimum wage keeping up with CPI has exacerbated inflation. Thoughts? No, there's no. So inflation has been a real mystery the past for a generation. There hasn't been much inflation, and it's gone against like all economic theory, and people kind of don't understand why it went away and what mechanisms happened. So does raising the minimum wage? It would not, because when you raise the minimum wage, you're not increasing the supply of money into the system. So for inflation to happen, theoretically, you need to increase the supply of money, but you're just requiring that businesses pay their workers more. So the businesses would either like have less profits of their own, or hire fewer people and have the same amount of profits, but just distribute them to different people. So it wouldn't affect anything at all, because there's not a mechanism for creating a greater supply of money. The supply of, theoretically, the supply of money is controlled by either the government printing money, or banks and investment firms like holding money and having loans and things like this, and creating stuff like that in the marketplace. But it wouldn't be affected by a business having minimum wage. I mean, I understand like where the thought is coming from. The thought is coming from like, oh wait, people are getting paid more, therefore there'd be more money in the system. And it's like, no, it's actually, there's the same amount of money in the system. The supply of money is the same. You're just changing the distribution of where it goes, either from the business to the worker, or from more workers to fewer workers, which is the argument. Some people claim, like the people that are against raising the minimum wage usually point to the idea that a business would just choose to hire fewer people with the same amount of money, and so you're now you're just increasing unemployment. While the people that are for raising the minimum wage would say, well, the workers are going to get paid more, and it's going to come out of the profits of the firm. So that's essentially where it is. But it's not. But I don't. Yeah, they wouldn't really affect each other too much. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Let's see here. Where's I mean, if I see him again here in here, let's see. I can ban here. So my banning, I've got like two screens going here, and the on my Here we go. Ah, crap. Let's try this guy again. There we go. That's one down. I've got two screens. It's not as easy when I use my eCam to ban people that should be banned. But I have been keeping an eye on at least one of those, and one of them hasn't posted in a while, so I can't ban him. Or, you know, I have to go back, actually. I can go back and ban him, because he was annoying. But, here we go. Let's see here. There we go. Okay. Now we can go on. So Phil, poor foreign me, and is Preston pro or anti-gun control? I'm pro gun control. Oh my God. Keep in mind, I'm really far left on this one. I don't think there should be any guns in America. I think that guns should be banned. I mean, now but I'm, you won't find too many Americans as far left as me on this issue, but I'm just like, dude, Americans, like, you lost your privilege, man. You lost it. Like, you fucked up. Like, you guys couldn't handle it, and you're dumb. You just, like, Americans are proved to just be too dumb to handle guns. Like, you know, and I get it. You know, guns are fun. You know, playing darts is fun. You know, but I'm not gonna fucking like forge my identity over darts and stuff like that. And I know people are like, oh, but I like to hunt, and it's like, yeah, I'm sorry, it was ruined. You befriended. You should have told your friends to stop being fucking like idiots about it and stop making it cool. Like, you know, I'm sorry for your loss of ability to hunt, you know, but I'm sorry. You screwed up. You know, that's what I am completely, utterly for the complete banning of guns. I mean, you know, it's like, come on, like, look at these girls. Look at these girls. You know, this is just two. This is just two. I mean, it's 19. That's just like, it's actually been like 2,000 people have died in mass shootings. It's just like over the top, like how ridiculous like it is. And like there's no good argument. There's no good argument. You see like the most dishonest like arguments going forward from people about it. And that's the thing, is like when every argument is such a flat out lie, you can start pulling it apart. Like you're just like, oh, here we go. Put another one here. She made the honor roll. There we go. Huh. That's literally what the Taliban did, my guy. We're talking about overthrowing governments. That's not what the Taliban did. Okay. Taliban used a lot of diplomacy. All right, a lot of diplomacy, like place to place, to overthrow everything. Okay, it was not just a bunch of small arms. It was not that at all. Like, this is why like they won so fast. They're like, okay, our forces can just like defeat them, and they're like, actually, all the forces are Taliban. Oh wait, what happened? The Taliban had infiltrated everybody, and they just went, we're Taliban. Like, yeah, no, Taliban won with diplomacy. They didn't win with small arms, you know. But they also live in a mountainous place where you can't exactly like do tank warfare, you know. I mean, it's not the United States. But no, not at all. Like, ridiculous. In fact, it's actually how we took Afghanistan in the first place. Back in 2001, Afghanistan was taken really fast because we did it through diplomacy. We went through with buckets of with like suitcases filled with money and just handed them to tribal leaders. The tribal leaders were like, "Fine, you know, we're pro-America now." And then over time, the Taliban went the other way and was like, yeah, if we give you a briefcase of money, will you be Taliban? Sure. It was all diplomacy. Nothing was won either way with tanks or guns. It's ridiculous kind of stuff. Diplomacy both ways. With Rains and Casimir gone, the Farmans have grumbled. Will anyone get ambitious? Jane's family are too small, right? Any hidden Bolton, Frey, Royce, Ironwoods parallel in the West? I think there's plenty of opportunity for that. I think I would say that the big one that I think about is Crakehall, where we get kind of this big move of Kyle Crakehall like agreeing to stay around the twins and get with Gatehouse Amy, and they're like the Freys are squatting on Derry, like when the Lannisters have claimed it and think it should be theirs, but the Freys think it's theirs, and it's a certain like faction of Freys, the Crakehall Freys, who think it's theirs, and then you have Cal Crakehall being like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be on this too. So I think there's a Crakehall situation of trying to gain power in the Westerlands. And there's probably some other options, but everybody's ambitious. But yeah, there's always another bannerman that's trying to rise up. But I'd say that the most obvious one is Crakehall for me. Let's see here. Let's move down here. Here we go. If my champion is Bronn, who do you pick? Oh, crap. That's really good. That's a good question. Because Bronn's going to play dirty, but I have to know, like, if I knew that Bronn was going to play dirty, you want somebody that's just as dirty, right? Against someone like Bronn, maybe Oberyn, or was it like Oberyn not just like too flashy and that got him killed? Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, you definitely want somebody that's also going to be a ruthless fighter, and I'm trying to think who would be really Darkstar. Darkstar might be a good choice. I don't think Darkstar would fall for Bronn's shit. Yeah, there it is. There's my answer. Darkstar. He's gonna or he'll run away at the wrong time. Thanks for taking my dark economics. These live casts are fascinating. Anytime. Speaking of monetary policy, wondering if Rodrik the Reader has any connection to the Iron Bank. He seems very responsive to the threat of trade. Huh, that's interesting. Now, George R. R. Martin is not great with economics. He's not great. But Rodrik the Reader, he's just this incredibly smart character that we have no real idea like how far his connections go. Could be anything. He's a fascinating character. There's so much potential for him to be anything and anyone, considering that he has all these weird books and he's like all over the place and that kind of stuff. But I would guess that like he's just understands the threat of the Iron Bank, but I don't know if he'd be connected to them. I don't know if the Iron Bank would like the Ironborn too much. They seem like the Iron Bank people seem snooty. Yeah. Let's see here. Let's get down. Get through all these back. Okay. Why do you think the Republicans have headed towards fascism over the past century? They are just a reactionary party that halts progress, and it sucks. What did historical conservatives want? Um, so my mother is a huge bleeding heart liberal now, but like when she was young, she says she was part of the Young Republicans crew, and you know they kind of started out on this preach of like individual responsibility and like fiscal concern, like being fiscally responsible. Like you don't want the government to be spending too much and getting in debt and things like this, and so you sometimes get this idea that that's what the historical conservatives wanted. They wanted to like some sort of like fiscally responsible situation where, you know, you're not just handing out money to people for people to live on the dole and stuff like that. Like, you know, we kind of, Americans hear these stories about, I know that Ireland isn't even like this anymore, but people hear these stories about like these unemployed people on the Irish dole just sitting around, not collecting, you know, not working and just collecting government payments. And I think they didn't like that notion. And then, you know, it was that those threats were kind of exaggerated, but then they started like just inventing them. And so like when Reagan came along, he started talking about the welfare queen, this idea that there's just like this woman sitting around with 20 kids, like collecting these huge welfare checks, you know, and stuff like that, that didn't really exist in America. And so it was a lot of things happened at once. So when I say like there's three types of Republicans, like the fucking assholes, the selfish pricks, and the religious freaks. So the selfish pricks like started inventing these like incorrect facts about America to sort of like make people in their mind think that there's this huge welfare state like draining them, and like every hardship you have in your life is really because somebody else isn't working and they just need to start working. And so I've met a lot of people, some very educated, who still have this idea that like, oh, you know, if the poor paid their fair share in taxes, like they wouldn't, you know, we'd have more money. And you're like, the poor don't have any money to pay taxes. What are you talking about? But you know, there's definitely this idea, and that kind of came about under Reagan. And then around that same time, they started bringing in the evangelicals on the abortion issue, and you started having this like merging. And so I don't know, it was this combination of like, we don't want social programs, and we're gonna be super religious. And then something else happened later, kind of under W, and expanded under Trump, where they kind of lost the idea of fiscal responsibility. They kind of said, oh, you know, what plays is populism. So we'll just spend, we'll spend a bunch on different programs, just, you know, and just cut taxes. And so the Republicans became as Democrats were stereotyped as the tax and spend party, Republicans became the borrow and spend party. And, you know, and then, I don't know, like, the Trump idea of like subverting democracy is very, very new. And then the gun stuff just got worse and worse over time. I mean, keep in mind that like the Republicans were fairly on board in the early 80s for assault weapon bans and stuff like that. And then it just over time just got like, no, you can't do anything. You can't do anything. Which has been, it didn't happen all at once, but so I can't point to like any like main thing, but it was kind of this idea of taking like kind of like things that people felt in their gut that like, some people aren't putting in their fair share, and then taking it to extreme and just starting to lie to people. Just the other day I was arguing with somebody where they somehow believed this fact that's been going around that 75% of black men abandon their children, you know, in America. And they just throw around this statistic, and you're like, what? Where did this come from? It's complete bullshit. Okay. It comes from the fact that like 75% of black men are not married. So they use this like marriage statistic as like you're abandoning your children, when in fact, like there actually is not this, and they'll start talking about like, oh, the black community, like men abandon their children. Complete myth. Okay. It's it's something like 44% of black men don't live with their children, but they still like 75% of those are still like in their child's lives. So like it's actually only like 10%, like, which is like, once you adjust for income, is the same as white people. It doesn't really make, I mean, poorer people tend to not be in their children's lives as much as like wealthier people. So once you adjust for income, there's no real difference between white people and black people on this front. But like, you start like asking the different questions, like, well, wait a minute, why isn't he residing with his family? It's like, well, when you live in an urban environment where land prices like cost more, like say you have a child and you live in a small apartment with your parents, and your partner and your child live in a small apartment with their parents, and you can't afford to get your own place. Like on their statistics, like this is a black male that has like abandoned his family. But it's like, no, he's super poor and he lives in a small apartment with his parents, and she's super poor and lives in an apartment with her family. So, they can't live together. Like, I mean, he could stay over, but his official residence is still his parents. All these complexities, but like, they're really like into these lies now, like painting this world that's not out there. I don't know if you remember like Trump's like inauguration speech about America being like, in shambles, in economic disrepair. And it's like, America was booming with like lowest unemployment ever at that point. But they can just say this shit and people just believe it. It might be the disinformation age probably has a lot to do with it. Hey, just started the stream. Dwarf skulls are bigger than human skulls. Prepare to be canceled. I mean, it's just a fact. You can look that one up. Dwarf, people with dwarfism like have slightly larger heads than people that don't. And I mean, I think in Ice and Fire, like several times, like they talk about Tyrion's head being rather large. But yeah. There's another thing about like why we can't have nice things is like, people taking like clipping and taking things out of context. Like, we had free speech and then we frickin' ruined it. We ruined it with this shit, right? Like, I'm from Buffalo. I love the city, but it's segregated. What are the modern effective policies that can desegregate a city? That's a really good question, because segregation is something that just kind of happens on its own. And this just happens. It has to do with like game theory and stuff like that. Like generally speaking, people are comfortable around people like them, and so when demographics shift a little bit, you'll have one person leave, and then that shifts the demographics more, and then another person leaves, and stuff like that. So what modern policies can desegregate a city? It's tough. I would say that I think you want to spread out public housing, not have public housing in one place. You want to some of it happens like right now, desegregate like segregation is going down just because of gentrification, but eventually it's still they're just pushing it somewhere else, so it'll resegregate again. I'm not saying gentrification is necessarily good or bad, but what can we do to fight it? I mean, I think it's maybe a social cultural thing. You have to somehow like make people not think it's bad or uncomfortable to be in a situation where, like, if you're the only white person living in a black neighborhood, like, or the only white person being in a black neighborhood, you want to make that as comfortable as possible. And so, you've got to do a lot of things. You've got to have police people like not harassing people. You've got to create safe streets. This is a really complicated one. You couldn't solve it in a generation or 100 years, but it takes a lot. You need society to be less racist. You need police to create safer streets and treat people equally. And I don't know. You need a more mixed up society. You want to not concentrate public housing in one place, um, you know, or even sometimes it's not even having like the one building. Sometimes it's like having one public housing like apartment, in a building, and then having everything spread out. Because you want the same thing for like schooling and stuff like that. You want to have like integrated schools where both high income and low income people are, and people of every color, like in the different schools learning from each other. And not to mention you want both rich and poor people in the same areas for tax bases so that schools are funded properly. So oh gosh, I wish it could be done easily. Why didn't Euron just off Rodrik when he arrived? He murdered a bunch of other potential problems. Was Rodrik loud about being anti-Euron, or was he keeping it kind of a secret? Like Baelor Blacktide was pretty out and about it. But I'm trying to think about. I'm gonna see, like, yeah, Rodrik clearly supported Asha, but at the same time, like, did he, was he like cheering during the Kingsmoot or something like that? Was he keeping quiet? He may have been a smart cookie. Rodrik. I'm doing a search. Rodrik. How am I spelling it? Rodrik the Reader. Oh, no. Yeah, okay. No C. Rodrik. There we go. Let's see what he does during the Kingsmoot. No, I guess Rodrik does cheer out victory during Victory and Asha. And then he conspires with Gerald Goodbrother and Old Drum. All right, let's look at his family again. This is getting to be a good point. Like Rodrik. Let's see here. It may be that there was because he did have one Harlaw. There was one Harlaw that totally went over to Euron. And so it may be, I think, yeah. Though I think he might have been okay with the murder of his cousin. So I think you're looking at it. I think you're highlighting a mistake on George's part. Like you're right. Euron should totally be killing Rodrik Harlaw. Like the guy calls out for Asha. Like he's conspiring behind his back. He's way too smart for his own good. Like should Rodrik totally be killed? Yes. That's yeah. No, that's just. There's no reason that Euron should have left him alive. You're correct. This is an interesting point. Wealthy people are not in their kids' life. This is a very good point. That having the same residence, counts as being in someone's life, but like, that doesn't actually say anything about how much time you're actually spending with someone. It's that's a good point. Let's see here. The Three-Eyed Crow talked to Bran, but Jojen got a dream. Why? Well, my idea is that like it was most important that well, I'm trying to think. Did the Three-Eyed Crow ever? I guess he did like speak to. Okay. I mean, I guess it's the idea of what would work to bring someone forward. Because, like I say, I think personally that it's Mira Reed that's the more important character than actually Jojen. I mean, Jojen has his uses because he, mentors Bran and things like that. But there is something like spiritual and mystical to visions, and they make people act in a certain way, and stuff like that, and it can be interpreted many ways and stuff like that. So I think I do think that it's just kind of what would work on Jojen versus what would work with Bran. Like his conversations with Bran are not very revealing either, though. Like so the visions with Jojen, for example, like the water going over the walls of Winterfell, and how it just makes Bran, like, because it's so abstract, anything that happens, like, Bran is just like, oh, it's correct, even though in fact, like, the water going over the walls of Winterfell doesn't really happen to the degree or like specificity that the vision has. Like, not the same people die, and like, he makes excuses for different people drowning. Like, getting stabbed in the back of the throat and dying is not drowning. But Bran sits there and goes, oh, he drowned in his own blood. No, he didn't. Like, drowning takes minutes. Like, he wasn't sitting there drowning on blood for minutes and then dying. Like, Bran put that in and like made that fit. So it may be that if time traveling Bran only has, like, he doesn't know necessarily how things are going to go exactly, but he has, a general idea. He might want his visions to be a little more ambiguous, so that people will make things fit on their own. Well, if he's very specific, like, if Three-Eyed Crow comes and he's like, Alebelly is going to be killed in this fashion, and Septon Shale is going to be killed in this fashion. Like, what happens if they're killed in a slightly different fashion? Like, if he goes in and he says, okay, Jojen, Septon Shale is going to be thrown down a well, and then in this timeline, like, he's stabbed in the back of the neck. Like, they go, oh crap, the Three-Eyed Crow, I guess, was wrong. He said Septon Shale would be thrown down a well. But you make something ambiguous, everything fits the prophecy. So it might be something like that. Not that I think that George thought about that. Oh. All right. I finally made it. Finally made it to the end. Well, now I can go back. Can someone tap into the weirwood without the Three-Eyed Crow being involved? Jojen is just a greenseer. That's a good question. Like, obviously we have these situations where, like, Jaime rests his head on a weirwood and gets visions, or Thoros of Myr, like, sits on top of a hollow hill of weirwood roots and gets visions. And there's this idea, okay, did the Three-Eyed Crow want those visions to happen, or did they tap in on their own to actually, like, get to those visions? And I don't know. That's a good question. But then again, when we think about, like, Bran, in order for him to actually join the weirwood net, he needs to do things like open his third eye and have weirwood paste and things like that to actually join. So there seemed to be a kind of process to it. I'm trying to think of, like, the parallels, because obviously the whole situation, like, parallels the Grishka from A Song for Leah. And in that situation, people actually joined the Grishka slowly. They first, like, had some Grishka added to their head, and then they lived kind of outside of the Grishka for a while before, like, eventually going in. But then again, like, Lyanna in that story just walks right into the Grishka. But, she was telepathically special and things like that. So, it's hard to say, like, what would happen if just, like, a rando without any telepathic ability, like, could they just walk into the Grishka? I guess. I don't know. Can anyone just join the weirwood net at any time, or do you need to do the acorn paste thing and stuff like that? I don't know. Um, Gonna be sick when Jojen just shows up in Bran 1 and is like, I hope you like the acorn paste. Like, he wasn't eating the whole time. He's like, what, you thought that was me? I mean, I guess that kind of happens in the Arya chapter where she's like eating the pork and she thinks that she's eating human, and the kindly man's like, dude, it's just pork. Like, you thought that was a person? So um ah what is the sci-fi explanation for the Black Gate talking and recognizing the Night's Watch's vow? I mean, I think the idea that is just that the Knights, that the Black Gate is some sort of ancient technology, and that this is some sort of like computer system or something that's opening up and recognizing somebody. Now, why? How it would know if somebody like prayed in front of a weirwood and took the Night's Watch vow and all of that, um, is a bit weird, you know. Um, we have to go back. I mean, it might just be like voice recognition password. What does Sam actually say to the thing? Like, could anyone just like say those lines and have the thing open? Um, let's see here. Got to go to the Black Gate. It's. I mean, it's not very good. Very good security. I'll tell you that. Um, let's see here. I'm trying to remember exactly what Sam says to the Black Gate. He might. Does he say his vows? Yeah, he does. He says, I'm the sword in the darkness. I'm the watch on the walls. I'm the fire that burns against the cold, the light that brings the dawn, the horn that wakes the sleepers. I am the shield that guards the realms of man. Then past, the door says, it lifts its open wide. Lips opened wide, wider and wider, until nothing remained except a great gaping mouth in a ring of wrinkles. Um, so it sounds like that was just like the password. It was just ancient technology, and he just like put in the password. And if anybody like said those same words, they could go in, I imagine. Um, will Arya use Tyrek's face to infiltrate Westeros? That's an interesting question. So Arya finds this Westerosi dead body in the House of Black and White. And there's a question of who that body is. She does it when she's the blind girl, right? Um, I want to get a description here because it's interesting. Okay, he says one man had died at the feet of the stranger, a single candle flickering above him. Okay, so the fact that like he's in front of the stranger means, okay, follower of the seven gods, clearly Westerosi. She could feel its heat and the scent that it gave off as it tickled her nose. The candle burned away. Before summoning the serving men to carry him away, she knelt and felt his face, tracing the line of his jaw, brushing her finger across his cheek and nose, touching his hair, curly hair, and thick, a handsome face, unlined. He was young. She wondered what had brought him here to seek the gift of death. Dying bravos often found their way to the House of Black and White to hasten their end. And so, everybody's kind of like, okay, who could this be? We've got a Westerosi with curly hair. And there's not, I mean, there's some Westerosi with curly hair, but, like some people are like, could this be Loras? Tyrek has curly hair. He's a Lannister. He could be definitely like handsome. The only thing is that he he's only like 14 or 15 years old. And so would Arya think he's a man? I don't know, maybe. Um there's a lot of these confusions. Like Jon is only 16, but everybody's fine with the prophecy. Oh, I saw a man transform into a wolf, transform into a man again. Even though Melisandre calls Jon a boy constantly, and we're completely fine with this idea that like Jon is a man in this context, but he's actually a boy. Um, and so how much can something be flubbed? He's 14 years old. Is he a man or is he a boy? Would Arya know? Like, if you, how tall is he? 14-year-olds can be pretty tall. They can be in their growth spurt. So could be Tyrek. Of course, the whole point of like using Tyrek would be like, oh, that he's smaller and that Arya could possibly like use his body or something. But if she thinks he's a man, does she think he's tall? So I think it's a good idea. But the one thing about Tyrek is that Jaime thinks that Tyrek was perhaps kidnapped by Varys. And which means he's probably not kidnapped by Varys. He's probably kidnapped by somebody else, like Littlefinger or something, because whatever an announced idea, announced plan doesn't happen. So I don't know, like, can you force somebody else to go to the House of Black and White and sacrifice oneself, like on somebody else's behalf? Like what gift was this person? What request was this guy making and things like that? Like, this is why some people are like, oh, it was Loras and he was trying to get somebody he wanted revenge for what they were doing to House Tyrell or something. I don't know. Like, I don't really have very many good ideas on who this guy could be. It could also just be like a random other person from some other house where we haven't gotten a description of their curly hair. Because then we're going with like any 20-year-old character in the story. And there's a lot, but it's a very interesting like idea, because it kills two birds with one stone, right? We've got this mystery person, and we've got Tyrek, so and we don't know where he is. So, I'm still not convinced the three-eyed crow is Brynden Rivers, who is the tree in Bran's dream. I mean, this is why, like, I think I'm on the time traveling Bran train, that it's actually been time traveling Bran the whole time. Got a little caffeine. Do you think George R. R. Martin draws on Alderian psychology as he rails against determinism? I'll have to look this up. Alderian psychology. Alderian theory is a holistic approach to psychology that emphasizes the importance of overcoming feelings of inferiority and getting a sense of belonging in order to achieve success and happiness. Interesting. So George has definitely some contradicting opinions, which all human beings do. But one of his big issues is that, like, so he grew up poor. He grew up very poor, and he but at the same time, when he portrays poverty in a lot of the stories that he writes, he'll have a character that escaped poverty, usually being him, right, of stand-in for him. And then he'll have the other characters who are like falling into the poverty, like falling into drugs, going nowhere, having no ambition, having no, resilience. And so on the one hand, he's like, he'll say like, oh, it's horrible that the system has put these people in poverty. But at the same time, he puts a lot of blame on the individuals themselves for not being resourceful. Like, it angers him that like some of these people can just like, waste their lives by by, falling into, being addicted to drugs or just never getting around to living their dreams. So he has both of them at once, like, claiming they're both factors. So he does kind of believe, like, because he's one that rose out of poverty, though it took him a fucking long time to get out of poverty. Like, it's not like he ever was super rich until Game of Thrones. Like, he was still like struggling to pay his mortgage, like all through his 40s. So he goes from both places. Like, he blames people for like their own individual like shortcomings, but at the same time he's very angry that there's this system in place that creates inequality. And his stories even go as far as like loathing the people that can't like rise up. Like, like he gets angry at them because and it comes from some place that's real. Like, I imagine, like, when he goes home, he feels like, oh God, like, why don't these people do something? Like his friends, from Bayonne, New Jersey. I make this joke a lot. So I grew up in Baltimore and lived in DC. And I often make this joke that, like, Baltimore is a place with people with a lot of talent and no ambition. And DC is a place with a lot of ambition and no talent. And it's true. Like, it's weird. Like, when I think of like my Baltimore friends and things like that, where I'm just like, wow, you were so creative and smart and intelligent and like, why didn't you like do something better and greater? Like, and a lot of it's just like, well, if no one else is doing anything great, you don't feel like compelled to do anything great, So, I mean, he's definitely also like an existentialist and like believes that we need to forge our own destiny, but at the same time, like, completely blames the system and like thinks like capitalism has its problems and is probably a communist. So, so I don't know if like it comes specifically from Eldarian theory specifically, but like he definitely believes in he definitely believes that people do have an individual responsibility, but which directly contradicts his idea that like we're also products of our environment. Luwin crawls for ages to get to that weirwood to die. He obviously thought he could get in. Hypocrite. Huh. I mean, in a sense, his blood and his memories and things like that get to join the weirwood, right? I mean, I think in that sense that you go. I mean, I don't know if that's a good question. Like, did he actually think his soul was going to go into the weirwood net, or was he just trying to like save his like memories? The Maester Walgrave wanted to be eaten by his ravens when he died. And I think that the idea is that like somehow the knowledge that he has would be passed into the ravens. But is there any difference between that? Is there a difference between your knowledge and who you are, your soul and stuff like that? I guess not. Not Nice and Fire. I think George R. R. Martin conflates those two. Yeah. No, I think you're completely right that like Luwin probably thought that like he would join the weirwood, and that that would be his afterlife, or at least his knowledge would pass on, which is yourself. Luwin's alive, I guess. Luwin's in there, I think, probably. He was he died in front of a weirwood, his blood like feeding the roots, right? I mean, it's no secret that like Luwin is a hypocrite. Like he really believed, he's one of these guys that like believed, those movies where people are like, oh, I really believed in Santa Claus. And then I was heartbroken when I found out that Santa Claus wasn't real. And then at the end, they're like, Santa Claus is real. And they're like, oh my gosh, this whole time, this is like Luwin's story, is that exact precise thing. Like, oh, I always wanted to believe in magic. And then I studied it and there was no magic. No, there's magic the whole time, Luwin. Yeah, Santa Claus. What two characters from the Thousand Worlds universe and A Song of Ice and Fire would you want to bring together in a multiverse adventure story? Um, Jesus. Uh would I want to have like the Hound and Britton Braith, like go on, go on, go on adventures together. Bretton Braith, for people that didn't read, uh, Dying of the Light, is a guy where half of his face is burned, like the Hound, and he's got a glowstone in place for one of his eyes, and he's going around hunting the protagonist for most of the story, and you think he's hunting him for all sorts of reasons, like, oh, he's a religious zealot, or he's doing it because all of his friends are doing it, and then you get to the end of the story and it's like, no, like, you killed my husband, like, of course I'm gonna try to kill you, I loved my husband, like, he's like, oh, oh, that's really quite simple. You know. um Good morning from Israel. Did you appreciate my analysis of your wedding? I have to remember the there was some. I'm trying to remember that something is ringing a bell about analysis of my wedding. I don't think there's much to analyze other than the fact, like, some people are like, wait, there's a dragon at Preston's wedding. Well, really a lion, but you know, lions look like dragons in Chinese folklore. It's actually there's a reason for it. Is that some Romans sent some lions east, and they eventually died, and Chinese people didn't know what lions looked like, so they made them look like dragons. Um, um, I'll have to be reminded on what that analysis was. Does Sarah Targaryen, being the mother of Alicent Hightower, explain all of the Alicent and Viserys kids being dragon riders? So this is a big kind of issue, and I'm eventually going to have to talk about this and over analyzing House of the Dragon, and it's a big part of the genetics of dragons in war. So, like, you know, I think there's a lot of evidence that, you know, at least recessive genes, like, are responsible for dragon riding and dragon hatching, right? And that, and I think evidence also shows that, like, women are singled out as being the problem. Dreamfire Rhaena, Rhaenys the queen who never was, Rhaenyra, Daenerys, and that makes me think enough that it's an X-linked gene. And so I kind of came up with the Dragon X theory. However, the biggest piece of evidence that, like, the Dragon X theory is bullshit is the fact that Alicent Hightower and Viserys I have dragon riding children. In fact, they have 3 dragon riding children: Aemond, Helena, and Aegon II. And their dragons hatched. Now, a lot of people could hatch the dragons, so maybe somebody else being around hatched those dragons. Maybe it was, you know, Rhaenyra's influence that hatched dragons. And Aemond didn't even. Aemond was flying Vhagar. So, but nonetheless, Aegon II's dragon and Helena's dragon, you know, hatched, and they're all able to fly. So the idea is that at least one, at minimum, one Dragon X gene, like, passed to the children. The problem is that Aegon II's a boy, so, and Aemond is a boy, so, or male, you know, and so they couldn't get an X from their father; they would have to get it from their mother, right? And so this is so I would say that, like, my Dragon X theory, the biggest thing that prevents it are these children and Alicent Hightower. Everything else, like, fits perfectly when you look at this, like, family tree and the intermarriages and everything. It's just, we've got this one big problem, and that's Alicent. Which kind of sparked all this idea of, like, well, could the Hightowers have Targaryen blood in them, or could they be Valyrian? Was Alicent not actually a Hightower? Could she be someone else? So some people say, well, maybe she was the daughter, some random daughter of Sarah Targaryen, or another idea is Arya's Arya Targaryen's sister. We don't hear about Arya Targaryen's sister too much, but what's her Rhaella? Rhaella. So there's this. So Dreamfire Rhaena had two daughters, Arya, who could certainly fly. She claims Balerion the Black Dread and like goes to Valyria and stuff. Meanwhile, Rhaella Targaryen became a septa, and then and Rhaella, she was just in Old Town as a septa, and there may have been a baby swap. So actually, Rhaella could be Arya and Arya could be Rhaella. It doesn't matter because they're twins, or at least sisters. I think are they twins? Yeah, they're twins. It doesn't matter if there's a swap or not, really. So, could the Hightowers have either like gotten Sarah's daughter, or even before that, snuck out Rhaella and had her inbreed with the Hightower family? Certainly, and that would help like explain like where Alicent Hightower's special genes came from, or maybe the Hightowers just are a very ancient house that has has Valyrian blood. Who knows? I mean, we know there, according to legend, there are dragons in Westeros in the early days. So, it could be that there were other dragon riders way back in the day. So, those are the big possibilities. Yeah, it's maybe one of Sarah's kids. For some reason, the Sarah Targaryen theory has gotten more traction than, say, the Rhaella Targaryen theory. But, Rhaella was in Old Town, so they could have done anything they wanted with her. So, yeah. And so we've got a few things that, like, not many, but we have a few things that make us think that maybe the Hightowers, like, have Valyrian blood. So one is that Mace Tyrell is married to Illyri Hightower, who has silver hair, and she's only in her 40s, and so it's a little weird that she has silver hair so young. Not impossible that she would have gone gray young, but odd. And then Lynesse Hightower looks like Daenerys, and so we've got another thing. Oh, you look like a Valyrian, okay, and then we have Jaehaerys confusing Alicent for Sarah. So we have, like, I'm not saying it's, huge decisive stuff, right? But we do have like 3 points in which we hear that, these people look Valyrian. Now, the actual picture in Fire and Blood of Alicent Hightower kind of shows her as a brunette. So, that kind of goes against it. I don't know, like, how much those pictures are canon, or are they considered, like, history and therefore susceptible to bias? Like, did the artist, like, put in the fact that she had brown hair, when in fact she had silver hair? I don't know, but in order for the Dragon X theory to be correct, Alicent needs to have a Dragon X gene. She needs at least one Dragon X gene. And so, I think those two possibilities, Rhaella and maybe, a child of Sarah or something, could work to get, or just the fact that they were Valyrian from the beginning. But we just have those 3 points. We have those 3 pieces of evidence that show that there's some sort of similarity. Well, plus the fact that the kids can dragon ride. But yeah, that's begging the question and, like, circular reasoning on the Dragon X theory. But yeah. Long explanation on that. Have you been to North Korea? And can you tell me how they function economically? It's kind of hard for me to get info about it. I have not been to North Korea. I do have friends who have been to North Korea, but uh, it's very difficult for an American to go. If you're in Beijing, there is a tour company that does uh, week long guided tours of North Korea. You just basically you see a bunch of halls, you see the inside of hotels and things like that, and um, I think an American kid was on one of those, and then what he tried to steal a poster off the wall, and they murdered him. Like just anyway. But I do know some people that have been, and they said it was really weird. Like they didn't get to see any of North Korea. They didn't get to see the people or anything, but they got to see like inside like big halls and statues and the inside of their hotel and things like that. But that's about it. Um, Now, how they function economically, I mean, under communism, you get these weird. So I'm one of these people that believes kind of like people naturally act in a capitalistic fashion. So you can try to put on like communist ideas, but like people are still going to kind of do things differently. But under communist systems, you get weird situations like land prices have no value. There's no value in land. Like those kind of things can't be owned. But it's really weird, but I kind of think that black markets must exist for buying a lot of like items. But I know that I think it's kind of like many of the stories that we hear about the old Soviet Union, like bread lines and things like that. Jobs and industries are created by the government and stuff like that. The firms are owned by the government. So you end up in situations where like industries that aren't necessarily profitable will continue on, while in a capitalist system they'll go away. There's I was reading about the end of the Soviet Union, and I listened to this podcast about how the Soviet Union became a petrostate, or how Russia became a petrostate. Because during the Soviet Union era, like the Russians made everything. They made everything. They made cars. They made ovens. They made refrigerators. They had this entire. They provided everything for communist countries. And so, why is it today that like their economy is almost entirely centered around oil? And the idea is that actually like it was actually the only efficient, profitable market ever. Like they had all these very inefficient systems that in a capitalist system would have died out long ago, but did not. And so when they actually ended the Soviet Union, one of the profitable companies, and one of the few profitable companies, or seemingly profitable companies, was this firm that made ovens, and they were exporting ovens to Germany, and they're like, oh, the Germans are just going crazy for these ovens. It turns out that Germans were buying the ovens and then melting them down for scrap, because the scrap was actually worth more than the oven than what they could buy for it. And it turns out like the whole economy was screwed up on like what they thought was worth their time and what was profitable. But so I imagine it's something like that there are some state-run industries that are propped up that are not profitable, and that people are given jobs and given positions. But I don't know too much about North Korea actually. Dirk is like Quentin, still alive. It's true. I mean, it cuts off before he dies, so it could be anything. Could be anything. XXY males, Preston. This is true but the probability of both Aegon II and Aemond being XXY. I also don't know about isn't there some I'm trying to think about fertility issues. First thing I Google when I put, it says between 95 and 99% are infertile. Let's see if did Aegon have any did they have any? I think they had those kids, and then Blood and Cheese killed their kids, right? Didn't that happen? Yeah, they had Jaehaerys, and Maelor. So I guess, I mean, it would be really coincidental for both sons to be XXY, but Aegon also has three kids, so he proves to be fertile, which XXYs are not. I think this was a question on whether or not, a lifetime ago, I theorized that Maegor the Cruel might have been an XXY or something, and everyone is like, what? How is he flying dragons, or something? Or but he didn't even hatch a dragon. He he took Balerion, but for some reason they were so against Maegor ruling that I was like, maybe there's something special about him, but maybe they're just, I don't know. It was another twin swap. It's possible. It's just that we don't even know like so much about Aerea and Rhaella. Like, why it would be relevant for them to be swapped? Like, you could swap them, but it's like, okay, you swap them, and then these adventures happen to them. Like, what was the implication of that? Well, none. Like, like. Like, imagine if like two twins are swapped at birth and live their whole lives. Like, I mean, at any point they could have been swapped, but it doesn't necessarily change the story in any respect. Like I suppose it changes the story in the sense that, okay, it changes the story in one respect, that Maegor the Cruel declared Arya his heir, and so if really Rhaella was the one that flew off to Valyria and died, and Arya is the one that actually was the true heir and had children, and then they got passed down into the Hightowers. Then it turns out that the Hightowers are actually the true heirs the whole time. I mean, there could be something like that, but that's the only relevance is the fact that Arya was declared an heir by Maegor. But other than that, I don't know. I don't necessarily think that like swapping them makes any difference. But no one ever thinks about them being the true heirs anyway. I think as somebody discussed, like the true heir is probably if we go with like if we think that Rhaenys, the queen who never was the true heir, and that she got screwed, then really primogenitor succession would mean that it would go down to the Valyrians, like Laena Valyrian's children. I think there's a Rhaella Valyrian or something, and they have like 6 kids who I think also like marry into the Hightowers. So, but we never hear about them. They have like 6 daughters, but they would be the true heirs. Would you want to go to North Korea? I mean, I would. I'd like to see it. I think at this point it's just too dangerous for an American. Plus, like, I couldn't. I mean, I would be fired if I went. I'm still employed. Like, I could not do it. They would. The North Koreans would probably like just arrest me. Like, they'd be like, why is this like, government worker like on this trip? I don't even know if they let in Americans anymore after the debacle where they killed that kid. But I'd like to see everywhere. I mean, it would be fascinating to see it. My friend that went thought it was really interesting. He thought it was one of the weirdest places he ever went. I was in Eritrea and I met this Japanese British guy who loved just going to the randomest places. He would choose the most random places on Earth and go there. So he'd been to North Korea, and then he was going to Eritrea, and then he was choosing some other random places to try to go. I think he went to Tajikistan after that. Like, that's what he just like. He loved going places with no tourists, And so of course we got to talking because there's no tourists in Eritrea, So like, he was a pretty interesting guy, but he had gone to North Korea, and so. But I think it's a little different for an American, and I think it's a little different for an American who's an employee of the U.S. government. So I'm not going to do it anytime soon. So unfortunately. Um, Maegor the Reasonable, really. Well, I mean, he kind of went crazy with the burning people. He didn't handle things very well. Hello, hello, Carmine.
Yo,
Carmine.
am I late by the way? Because you
Yeah,
messaged me
you
on
could have joined
Facebook to get on,
early
and I'm
in.
like,
Yeah. This is a really interesting point that perhaps it was Maegor that hatched Quicksilver the whole time, and then it went to and then the hatchling went to Aenys, and that actually really like Aenys's dragon is really is really Maegor's, and that would explain why they were so anti Maegor. But how's it going, Carmine?
I always try to make sure if I'm going to join that it's at least like 2 hours after the because the audience doesn't know this. I feel like I said this before. The audience doesn't know this, but Preston will message me before he'll stream on Facebook. He'll
Mm.
be like, "Yo, bro, I need you to get in here because sometimes I have nothing to fucking talk about. I need you, I need you to get in here and save me." I'm like, okay, okay. But I feel bad though because I feel like your audience gets enough of me already as it is on the podcast, so I want to give them more time with you
I mean,
alone.
I think over time, people have definitely like come around on the Carmine. You know.
Well, we have been doing the podcast longer than we haven't. If you noticed that, we've been doing it
Oh,
for over 5 years.
oh my God. Yeah.
It's literally April is when we started 2017. So we've been doing it for literally over 5 years. Where does the time go? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. It's ridiculous, right?
One moment you're doing Game of Thrones videos in Germany, and the next you're in Taiwan fighting off Chinese spies. Which, by the way, is how Preston got that black eye.
I have a black eye today.
You don't see it right there. It's right
I mean,
there.
so I've always had like deep set eyes, and so purple eyes, but also like where my ring light is probably angled a little.
Is that where your son kicked you in the face?
But he like got straight into the eyeball. Um, is that better? My ring light was just like not
Oh
facing
no,
me.
I'm not trying to fuck with you. I'm set because you told me your son accidentally kicked you in the face.
Oh no,
So
no. I mean, the thing is, people like all my life have said to me like, "Oh, do you like?" Especially like, say I don't get very much sleep or something, and I'm like rolling into like this is like classes in college or something. You know, you have some crazy night, you roll in, and they're like, "Oh my God, did you get in a fight?" And I'm like, "No, dude, I just have like deep set eyes that are like kind of purple." You know, um, but no, I mean, yeah. If I were one that wore makeup, I guess you know they put concealer or whatever. But it's just
by the way, for the audience who wants to know, we did record Kenobi, where Preston and I kind of make fun of a 10-year-old's running, but
by the way, since the podcast that we recorded, so we recorded a podcast. I'll post it later. Um, but he I called my nephews um, uh, yesterday, and I was like, "Oh, did your parents let you watch Kenobi?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I was like, "What'd you think of young Princess Leia?" And they both said, and keep in mind, one's 12 and the other's 9, and they both said she looks like she's 6.
yeah,
Yeah, and
she looks like Dory.
I was like, and this is from kids like that age. Like, so it's not just like us like being old and not being able to tell like what kids look like, right? Huh. But then again, I mean, all these kids are 10, right?
I guess. By the way, what was I gonna say? Oh, for the audience who cares, this is one of the random YouTubers I know list. I know this one YouTuber named Vexed, VEXXED. He's the one I told you about years ago. Who, according to him, he illegally entered North Korea.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah, I
and it's
watched
the
the
last
video.
video
I watched the
he
video
ever
you
did.
sent me. Yeah.
By the way, it's the last video he ever did. No, he did not die in North Korea. He just, I guess, teaches Japan. He teaches English in Japan now. That's his job. So
Yeah. So I mean, imagine there might be another like tour group company. Like I don't think he snuck in illegally. I think what happened is he went on one of these guided tours, and then maybe he snuck out of his hotel for an evening because he's in a square at night.
This is 4 years ago.
Yeah,
so
he's in a square at night. So I think what happened is probably he went on one of these guided tours because it's the only way into the country. And then he probably like left his hotel and went into the square outside of his hotel and then went back and had his little like video that we watched, which is still pretty ballsy. I mean, I'm not going to say that's not ballsy. Something I would not do. Like I say, like that American kid died for taking a poster off the wall. Like, you know, so it's
I think Vex's citizenship. I think he has Irish citizenship.
Yeah.
So I think that's how he gets past it.
Yeah.
Even though he sounds like an American guy.
You do still have baby teeth at 10. I'm just you start. That's when you start like losing them. But yeah, you still have some baby teeth at 10. Yeah. But yeah, we won't spoil anything. It's just, you know. The no, I mean North Korea is a weird place and that video is weird. But yeah, I think he probably went he was probably living in Tokyo, saw like one of those tour situations and then left his hotel and went back in, you know. Different times people do weird stuff. Like, I don't know. My first time to Afghanistan, I was in a room with some people that are like, oh, we're going to go to the restaurant down the street. And I was like, what? You're leaving? What? You're leaving the compound? Like, it's like, don't. And they all went. I was like, I'm not doing that. They went to some restaurant down the street. And I was like, oh God. Yeah. But people do weird stuff. Yeah. So
what happened to all the spicy politics, by the way? And what's going on with these
we've been
pictures
talking
of
about
those,
it all. It's funny. This today has been kind of backwards. We talked about spicy politics at the beginning, and then had to ban a couple people. And then all of a sudden, like after I banned 2 people, then all of a sudden, like everything went super quiet. Everyone's like, oh, no more, no more.
And what's with the posting of these pictures of these kids? Preston, let's not get political. Come on now.
Yeah. By the way, Carmine, just saying, if I'm ever gunned down, can you please politicize my death as much as possible? I'm just saying that, like, if I'm going to get gunned down, I would like my death to be politicized as much as humanly possible. I want it to be, like, for something, right? Like, so please, whatever you do, please politicize my death.
By the way, my take on gun control, you don't want that, Kyle.
Yeah, okay.
By the way,
I mean, you've heard my unicorn like I love dick solution. That if we just paint all the guns like pink and have glitter on them and I love dick, like the problem will go away.
I guess. I guess it will. If you do die, what happens to your channel? Will your wife inherit it? Will it pass down to your son?
Fucking down the list of like.
Because I actually was thinking about this. Someone asked me this question today, and I was like, they asked, would you give Preston your channel? I think I would give, no offense, Preston, I think I would give it to, believe it or not, one of the nicest human beings I've ever met, Phil the Issues guy. I think I would give it to him. I think I would want him in my will.
Oh, sure. I mean, I don't know if Phil would feel comfortable, but Phil would be like, yeah, because Phil's a super nice guy. And he'd like make a video like, yeah, like Carmine gave me his channel, but I don't really feel that comfortable like doing this. So
I
thank
should
you.
probably tell him.
Like,
I didn't tell him. I'll tell him right now. Hold on. Message him.
just joined with their bands. No, it's just a bunch of, it was some right wing trolls that were like posting the coronavirus was like fake and stuff like that. That was just like, and they're posting like every 5 posts, and it was just like, okay, you're gone. Like I had to like stop. I've never seen Loyal Citizens of Pyong and Seoul. No. I imagine there must be some North Koreans that like make it over into Seoul and live their life. There was a case of a guy who like escaped and then decided to go back because he ended up just not liking living in Seoul. But yeah, it's a little movie documentary about North Korean citizens and their experiences after defecting. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that might be an interesting story. I'd like to, because from what I hear, the ones that enough time has passed that North Korean is now significantly different from South Korean in like linguistically, and so like there's actually some trouble communicating now. But yeah, I don't know. Where's the most interesting place you want to go, Carmine?
Nowhere. My bed. That's the that's I have no ambitions of going in. Maybe that'll change in the future, but as I really just I'm okay. America number one for me.
Yeah,
America number one.
I was just looking at this thing about erosion. China was dredging and stealing sand from Taiwan recently. Seashore erosion is a big issue in my neck of the woods. Eventually comes out of the earth. Well, this is one of the reasons why like China building these islands in the middle of the South China Sea is kind of silly because the sea level's rising anyway and they're going to be gone. So doesn't really. I mean, I guess they can just try to build them even higher. But does North Korea have K-pop? I don't think so. A lot of North Koreans take up Christianity when they come. So this is an odd thing about like Asians and Christianity. Let's be super stereotyping, but it's a little different. So and this goes for like now Korea is a very, very Christian country. I think it's like 60% Christian. Taiwan not as much, but it's a significant percentage, like 20% or something. But there's also a big difference. It says that only 28% of South Koreans are Christian. I was wrong. And only like 3% in Taiwan. I thought it was much higher. I actually have this weird story. I'll have to tell you. I can go into it here. But once they kind of head to America or foreign communities, they end up becoming very Christian, and this just has to do with like, the center of the community is the church, and so like you want to fit in when you're an immigrant and you want to fit in with everybody else. You're like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to go to church, and then you end up converting because everybody else converts. So like, even though only 28% of Korea is Christian, like in America, we associate like Koreans with being very religious Christians, like, and there always being like a Korean church down the road. At least where I grew up in Maryland, like there's a lot of Koreans and a lot of Korean churches. But I think it has to do with like assimilation and where to go and what your friends are doing. And sometimes it's also like what you perceive like modernization and westernization is, and like trying to adhere to that, not realizing that like the super modern Westernists are all atheists, like you leave this like backward atheist country and you're like, okay, I want to be Western. Let me be religious. And you're like, well, actually, like, the super modern people aren't very religious at all. But I think there's a lot in that, I mean, I think that's why most people are religious. It's not really that they sat down in front of a book and was like, oh yeah, no, this makes sense. I've accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. Like most people are religious because their dad was religious, their grandfather was religious, and so they want to have a connection to their family, and so they use religion as that connection. Like my grandfather really liked gin and tonics, and like And sometimes I order a gin and tonic, and I'm like, yeah, I can go for a gin and tonic. It makes me, on some sort of subconscious level, makes me feel like I'm connected to my grandfather. Now, do you think my grandfather gave a shit whether I drank a gin or tonic or not? No, he doesn't fucking care. But, a lot of times it's like this with like religion. Like people are like, oh, well, my grandfather went to church. Maybe he went to church because, he was bored. Maybe he went to church to see his friends. But then somebody else like sees it and they're like, oh, I want to have a connection to my family. So they like do something that, they try to connect. And it's like, well, they may have cared about it or not. Doesn't matter. But, is your family religious, Carmine?
We're Brazilian, of course. We're religious. I'm not, but my grandmother was. My mother is. I'm not. I think they're Catholic. I was raised Catholic, but I believe in nothing. You die, you die.
In Igbo land, Christianity came within the last 2 generations. That's when missionaries came, and so they mixed with the babies. West Africa is a very, very religious and very spiritual place. Like they really think about like God on a daily basis and like their relationship with God. Like it's very, very spiritual. There's some interesting things about like how people perceive religion and like I remember being in the Middle East and some Muslim person was like, how do Christians pray? You guys do this, right? I'm like off camera. They do this, right? And I'm like, no, that's not really the prayer. Like that's the preparation for the prayer. And they're like, well, then what's a prayer? And I'm like, well, I think Christians, they just kind of like sit quietly somewhere and they talk to God. And I remember like her eyes like widened and she's like, what? You talk to God? Like, like whatever, that's weird. And I was like, that's really interesting that this Muslim woman who prayed every day thought talking to God was odd because like her concept of prayer was more about like, ritual that pays honor to God rather than the process of talking to God. It's not like when Muslims go to mosque 5 times a day, they're sitting there going, oh God, I hear you. Like, let Timmy get an A on his test tonight. Like they're not doing that. They're going through a ritual that like pays homage to God and like respects him. They're not like talking to him. So it's really weird how like these things that we sometimes think are so similar can be actually very, very different in practice. When I used to, this is my second time living in Taiwan, but 20 years ago I was living in Taiwan and I was studying Chinese in the subway because it's cool underground, and it like doubled as a mall. And these little kids run up to me and start talking to me, and so I start talking to them in Chinese because that's like my ability level, and still is pretty much. And I remember the mother comes over and like starts talking to me, and she's like, "Oh, I'm actually an English teacher. You're actually the first foreigner that I've ever met. This is a fairly common thing when you travel. Sometimes you'll meet people that teach English that have never met a foreigner, never met a native English speaker." And she's like, "Would you like to come over for dinner?" I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, I've never had like dinner at a Taiwanese person's house. This is cultural experience, So I was like, all right, I'll do it. Okay. So she gives me her address and time. And so like, later that evening I show up and, it's her husband's brother are there. And I walk in and their home is filled with, pictures of Jesus and like, those like tacky pictures of Jesus, like even some of the ones that like you change the direction and it's like 2 different images of Jesus, You know what I'm talking about, Carmine?
I think I do. I know Buddy Christ.
No. I'm talking like, you know those like playing cards that kind of have the texture, and if you look at them from two different directions, they're two different images.
I think so. You have to send me a picture. It's been a minute.
Okay, well, like around the world, they have like pictures of Jesus, like where it's Jesus, and then you angle it a little bit, and it's like a lamb. It's like this like little like this kind of stuff. Like there's a lot, like even though like there's plenty of kitsch Jesus stuff in America, there's a lot more kitsch Jesus like in Latin America and Africa and stuff like that. Like just, you know, cheaply made plastic like stuff. And so, you know, their house is just covered in stuff. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. They're Taiwanese Christians. Okay. And so we sit down to dinner, and they're like, oh, before dinner, let's pray. And I was like, okay. So, you know, I bow my head to be respectful. And they all start going, Jesus love, Jesus love. I love you, Jesus, Jesus love. And I'm just sitting there like, what the fuck am I like have I gotten into? I'm just sitting there like, I'm like biting my lip, like, what the hell is this? Like, yeah, Jesus love, I love you, Jesus. Like, and this went on for like a good 5 minutes. And then they finally end. I'm like, okay, that's not the grace that I was expecting. And so we have dinner, and it was fine. And afterwards, they like invite me to some like Christian concert. They were clearly trying to convert me. The rest of the dinner went like fine. And you know, they were nice enough, but I left being like, what the fuck was that? Like, how did they get this idea that, you know, saying grace would be like a bunch of like screeching and highs and like weird stuff? Like, how did that happen? And so later on, though, I went to a Buddhist temple, and like I noticed that some of the Buddhists were sitting there going, hey, as they did their prayers, which are like completely kind of different kind of stuff. But it's like, you know, when you have the example of one thing, like, oh, this is what prayer means in a context of like Chinese history and Taiwanese history, we think of this as prayer. But then when you see like, and then I'm going to replace that with Christianity, and then like, how do I adapt that? It's just kind of weird, right? You know, like the if you go to Ethiopia, the Christians in Ethiopia like bow and pray the same way that Muslims do, like head to the ground, kissing the side of the church, all sorts of stuff like that. Why didn't I ask them? I mean, you know, I was a young guy at the time, 23. How are their English skills? Well, she spoke fluently. Her husband spoke okay. Her I think the brother-in-law didn't speak at all. But yeah, it was, you know, it was a mix. Now a lot more people speak. Now that I've been back, but the Taiwanese are pretty good at English. They force their kids to go to these bushibans, they call them, where they learn English later on. It's pretty important for them to learn English. Most beautiful thing about Islam is how musical the prayers are. A lot of singing. This is actually a big point of tension. So a lot of people like, when we think of Islam, we kind of think of it as like this one thing. Oh, there's a billion Muslims, but their interpretation of Islam like varies from place to place a lot. And there's a lot of little infightings like on different issues. So one of the issues that there's a lot of fighting about are call to prayers. And so call to prayers in some places like Jordan and Egypt are beautiful, beautiful, beautiful things. You know, it's just like you hear this like Bismillah Rahman Rahim, you know, like, and some of them like are from practiced like professional guys who like spend their whole life like learning how to sing and have like beautiful call to prayers. And then there's some people though that believe that is a form of idolatry. Idolatry. They think that having like singing call to prayer is haram. And so other places they're like, no, the call to prayer should be like ugly. Like, so you go to another place and they're purposely trying to make call to prayer not beautiful, not a song, for that reason. It's really quite interesting how things can vary from place to place. Like, I think it's like more on like Wahhabi kind of ideas that you shouldn't be singing. But yeah. But it's definitely you're in the land of like beautiful call to prayers. But of course, once I had a work trip to Algeria, and the hotel that we got was like right next to the mosque, which is just like ridiculous. And because boom, awake like 5:30 in the morning, because they do a call to prayer 15 minutes before the first call to prayer in the morning, so it's crazy. And in Saudi, if you check into a hotel, some of them have speakers over your head so that like you will be woken up. Like there's not even a choice. Like, no, you're staying here. Like you're going to be woken up in the morning for your call to prayer. Like all good people should be, So it's kind of yeah, I mean, it's Christianity has the same kind of thing. Like, what is idolatry and stuff like that. Like even like American Protestants like kind of think it's creepy to have like Jesus on the cross and stuff like that. Even as an atheist, like being raised in a fairly Protestant society like America, like the first time I made it to Latin America, and you have these bloody mannequins, and people like kissing the feet of Mary and stuff like that, and praying to Mary, and crowds of women crowding around like statues of Mary, like weeping, going, "Oh, Mary!" Oh. And you're like, "Holy shit!" Like even as an atheist, I'm like, that just seems fucking wrong, right? But like, like you're raised in a Protestant society where you're used to churches being somewhat stark and simple, and like you learn that like, oh, you should be talking directly to God and not through like a bloody mannequin. But it's weird that like even as an atheist who never went to church, like I still have that like inculcated into me. I don't know. Carmine, how do you feel about the bloody mannequins? Very Brazil.
I have no opinion, thank God.
Yeah. Oh man. Right, but like in some places it's completely normal. But yeah, I do wonder if it's just like Protestant influence. Even Catholic churches in America are so Protestant influenced. Like they're so minimalist compared to Catholic churches in other places. So oh, you did the Camino de Santiago. The Camino de Santiago is the walk across Spain and stopped in Fatima. Fatima is Muhammad's daughter, who is later married to Ali, and so because the Spain used to be Muslim, there is a city in Spain called Fatima. Fatima. Oh, I guess Fatima is in Portugal. So you did a Camino that crossed into Portugal. But yeah, there's some big issues about Fatima too. This is very Game of Thrones-ish, right? So Muhammad when he died, there was this idea of like Muhammad's inheritance and who Muhammad's inheritance would go to. And so because Fatima was Muhammad's only daughter, the idea is that all of his wealth and the title of being caliph should pass to Ali. However, among another group of people, they're like, well, it's different. It's fucking different for the prophet. Like you can't just like pass it by family. It's got to go to like Abu Bakr and Omar, and like, so all of the wealth went to Omar. Was it Omar first, or was it Abu Bakr? I'm totally blanking. First Caliph. So it went to Abu Bakr first, and then Omar. So this idea that like that like so in a really shitty sense that like they stole Fatima's money, like, and just were like, we're the rulers, sorry, you know. And so this is the big Shia Sunni split is over this issue. Now, Ali eventually becomes Caliph anyway, so some people are like, well, what's the difference? Like, why did it make such a big difference between like whether it went Omar, Abu Bakr, Omar, Osman, Ali versus like just straight to Ali? Like, who cares? And it's like, well, because they did a lot. There's a lot of laws called hadith, like sayings that happened under that time period, which makes like Shia and Sunnis completely different, you know. So yeah, so it's like creates these two, you know. But it's very Game of Thrones. So today though, Fatima's tomb is actually missing as well. No one knows where Fatima's body is. So like at some point, Fatima had a tomb in the Prophet's mosque in Medina, and then at some point during Saudi's reign, like the Saudi Arabian like reign, when the House of Saud took over from the Hashemites, like Fatima disappeared, and fucking no one knows where Fatima is. Now, the explanation on why Fatima was moved is that apparently, what was it? Oh, no, you know what? Omar and Abu Bakr are there too. And apparently, like the story is that Shias try to like shit on rags and then like throw in rags to like Abu Bakr and Omar's tombs. And so now you can't get close to any tombs anyway. But like, no one knows where Fatima went. Like some people think she's just like gone, but maybe her maybe her skull is on top of the mountain. I don't know. Mystery. That's very interesting that they have people seeing the Virgin Mary. The Muslims actually like are very careful about, so like in the Middle East in general, making fun of someone's mother or calling somebody a son of a bitch. Like if you say son of a bitch in the Middle East, people are ready to fucking kill you. Like do not ever like I mean in America we talk about fucking people's moms all the time, just like how I fucked Carmine's mom. But like people talk about fucking moms all the time in America, but like and calling people son of a bitches. But like if you mention like anybody's mom in the Middle East, they're ready to kill you. And so in Islam, like the Virgin Mary is she is very revered, and they do not say anything bad about the Virgin Mary ever. I mean, they like Jesus too, but like they really are just like, no, like wait, so you think that there was a virgin birth and she held all these visions from angels, and the Muslims are like, yeah, no, that totally happened. Like totally happened. Jesus was a virgin birth. Like we're completely on board with that. Like all of that. But they're like, but you don't think he was the son of God? No. Like everything else is fine. Like she had a virgin birth. She got all those visits from angels. We are not saying anything bad about Mary. Like she all of that is true. This is true too. I think it's only America maybe where they're just like everything's about fucking mothers as a way to really insult somebody. All right, I think I'm going to close things up now that we've gone on to weirdly Islam talk but anything else, Carmine, before you go?
Oh, nothing. I was just sending the death squads over to your house, you motherfucker. By the way, how's the next chapter coming along?
Well, the deadline hasn't come in, so I've gotten a few entries and I've looked over them, but a lot are going to come with the deadline.
Do you still have a consistent number of people sending you stuff?
I mean, we'll see. For the first one and the second one is consistent, so we'll see. This is a harder chapter, so we'll see. I think it's going to be harder for people to tackle, and so I expect there should be fewer because it's just like this is probably the most difficult chapter that we're ever gonna do. So, yeah.
Oh, geez. Good luck with that.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you everyone for hanging around. I'll see you guys next time.